Hi, I'm Susan Papanikolas from How Does Your Garden Grow in Seattle, Washington. It's late winter and I am all bundled up here at one of my clients' gardens getting ready to do the late winter cleanup here. The tools I brought with me to help me today are a couple of trugs for holding the weeds and moving the mulch around. My hand tools, I've got a handsaw, some hand pruners, and a trowel. The trowel's great for scraping the weed seedlings off the surface or poking out a little bit of weed where I need it. I've got a lot of gloves because my hands will probably get cold and it's nice to have a dry pair. I've got yard waste bags. I've got some compost for mulching. I've got a little rake for getting between the plants, a tarp to hold it all, a broom for sweeping the sidewalk when I'm done, and a mug of tea to help keep me warm. This garden is about 4 years old. We installed it around this time of year in late winter. One of the things that really informs what I do in my gardens in late winter for cleanup is what I don't do in the fall. I like to leave up a lot of the seed heads and stems and deciduous grasses during the fall because I think it adds a lot of interest to the winter garden. By this time of year, I'm ready to get rid of it. I want to see the freshness that's about to come with new spring growth, and I want to get rid of all of the previous year's debris and the fallen leaves and the sticks and the weeds and get it all cleaned up and ready to go. Clear the decks so we're ready for the spring growth that's just around the corner. Okay, I finished the late winter cleanup. We did this over the course of a few days. I lucked out on the weather. I just thought I'd go back over what I did a little bit. I cut back all the deciduous perennials that were still up. There were some sedums that had old flower stems on them. There were some Papanikolas grass that had turned to straw. I cut all of that back down to the ground or to where the new growth was coming out so that we were ready for that new growth to come up without getting tangled up in the old stems. There's a few different ground covers here and some of them are very aggressive. So I was a little rough on them. There is a really beautiful kind of gray leafed Silene ground cover in this garden that's semi-evergreen, so it still had some green up and it had some straggly stems. I was pretty rough on that and pulled it up in a lot of places. I didn't dig it out. The roots are still in there, but those stems I pulled up. I left a big patch where the slope was very steep to make sure I was gonna keep the soil stabilized in that area and covered because we have a lot of rain ahead of us here in February in Seattle. There was some lamb's ear in there that I also was pretty rough with. It's an aggressive grower in this space. It really is happy here and it had a lot of winter damage on it. The leaves were kind of mushy and brown and ugly looking. So I pulled a lot of that dead stuff off. I cut some of it back. It doesn't necessarily look better right now, but when the leaves come in the spring, it's going to be beautiful and it won't have that old stuff left behind that's kind of marring what's pretty and fresh. There's a big New Zealand flax in this garden, and it had gotten hit hard by a really cold week that we had a few weeks ago. So most of the leaves on it were dead. So I cut that back completely to the ground. If a lot of it had been alive, I would have just pulled off the leaves that looked a little crummy. But since most of it had really gotten zapped and looked pretty terrible, I cut the whole thing back. And I really couldn't tell whether I was going to do that or not until I got in there and started working with it. And then it became clear to me that I had to cut it back entirely. That was kind of a heavy duty job. It took a long time because those leaves are very fibrous, and it just was sort of time consuming to get way down at the base of the plant. I didn't want to leave stubby leaves up. I wanted to be down at the bottom so I could remove that foliage entirely. There's a Drimys lanceolata in this garden that also got hit hard by that frost and had a lot of dead leaves on it. So the way I handled that was I just shook it and all the dead leaves fell off. I'm pretty sure that one's going to recover nicely, but I'm going to be keeping my eye on that. And then since it's winter and I could see the framework of the smoke bush really nicely, I was able to get in and prune off some branches that were going kind of into other plants or congesting the center of the plant. So I did a little bit of cleanup there. And the way I got it out of the way of other plants was by cutting a branch off, leaving the branch collar intact and following it back to the base and cutting it back where it originated instead of shortening the branch. If I shortened the branch, that would have caused a lot of new growth to come out and would have sort of exacerbated the congestion of that plant where it was hitting other ones. So instead I removed the branch entirely. You'll notice a lot of what I did was picking up stuff, picking up the old leaves, picking up the stems, picking up weeds. There was just a lot of stuff to pick up. And there were actually quite a few weeds that I was pulling as well. It doesn't seem like winter would be a great time for weeding because most things are dormant, but the weeds somehow, they're so tenacious, they're there. So I could see where those were, and I spent a lot of time getting weeds out because that's going to give me a head start when the spring growth starts to have set those back a little bit. I didn't use a leaf blower. It's not perfect. We're outside, it's okay. And then I finished by mulching. That covered up some of the old stuff on the ground that I wasn't able to get, every fine little thing. So now that's kind of under a thin blanket of mulch and it's ready to go. The spring growth will come on and it's going to be spectacular.